Greeting friends! While scrolling through my long-forgotten roster of characters, I stumbled upon one that had been left untouched for years. Her name, Mimi and Ridiculous, inspired me to bring her back in the most dramatic way possible. So today, I'm introducing a brand new challenge, the Dorori challenge. The name is heavily inspired by a famous anime. If you know, you know. The aim of this Dorori challenge is very simple. This is no ordinary leveling experience. It's not about reaching level cap or collecting gold. The aim of this challenge is to start completely without gear and fill each gear spot. The rules of this challenge are simple. Rule number 1. Solo only. You must complete this challenge solo. Rule number 2. No gear start. You must start completely without gear. Rule number 3. You can only get gear from dungeons. Rule number 4. The moment you walk into a dungeon, you cannot leave it, unless you kill the final boss. Rule number 5. When you walk in a dungeon, you will have 5 lives. If you die 5 times, you will have to delete the character and start over. Rule number 6. When gear drops from a dungeon, you have to spin the wheel to see if you can equip it or not. So therefore, you have no guarantee that you can equip any gear that drops. Rule number 7. If dungeons do not scale with your level, you are allowed to be the same level or 1 level less from the final boss in that dungeon. But I am pretty sure that the dungeons do scale with your level. I'm just pointing this out because I know that some leveling zones have a minimum level before the mobs start scaling with your level. If you notice that you are way under leveled for a dungeon, you can quest until you meet the minimum dungeon level stated in the rules. If and only if you quest outside a dungeon, you are not allowed to equip any gear. From the dungeons I ran so far, the bosses always scale with your level, and they tend to be a level higher than yours, so I am pretty sure I am overthinking this rule. If you manage to complete this challenge, you can start the Dorori Challenge Plus, where you try to complete every dungeon solo following the same rules. And that's basically the rules. Now that we have gone over the rules, let's start our adventure. One summery afternoon in the heart of Orgrimmar, a forgotten monk named OmegaMonka stirred from her slumber. She was weak, penniless, and clothed in nothing but her pride. Her ambitions were laughed at, her cries for assistance ignored.
Show me kindness, please.
She was determined to prove herself worthy of recognition, and perhaps one day, leadership within the Horde. On one of her rigorous training days, she overheard a rumor that an ominous group was living in a network of volcanic caverns that lie underneath the capital city of Orgrimmar. She discovered that this place, dwelling below this capital city, was called Ragefire Chasm. It was said that a dark cult had made their home there, performing vile rituals and commanding twisted beasts. With no gear, no allies, and no resources, OmegaMonka made a decision. She would descend into the depths and rid the world of this growing threat. This is the first challenge she will face off. Will she be able to prove herself worthy, or is she just another overconfident fool with something to prove? Only time will tell. Her journey began at the chasm's mouth. Lava bubbled nearby, the air thick with sulfur. The moment her foot crossed the threshold, she could feel something sinister watching her. She was suspecting that the rumors she heard were completely true. Her confidence was waning. She was acknowledging that this was not her usual training. This was the real deal. But she knew she couldn't turn back to how things were before. So she persevered and kept walking forward. Not long after entering, she encountered two familiar faces. Invoker Shorent, who warned her of new enemies lurking within, and Commander Bagran, who pleaded for the safe return of his trapped comrades. Accepting both of their requests, OmegaMonka pushed deeper into the cavern. OmegaMonka knew this was the first opportunity to start proving herself. She soon was facing her first true test. There were three unusually looking dogs feasting on the body of one of Commander Bagran's allies. Drawing upon years of monk training, she took a deep breath, calm, focused. One hound was paralyzed. The others she struck down using Tiger Palm, Rising Sun Kick, and Blackout Kick. Every moment was deliberate, every attack measured. She emerged victorious, though her heart raced with adrenaline. Now that she has defeated her first real enemies, she started to become more confident. Another hound caught her attention and decided to strike it down. An army of enemies were waiting for her along this path. One by one, she struck them down, leaving no one else alive. After defeating one of these flaming beasts, she realized that inside its ribcage a strange commoner's sword was pointing outwards. It must have surely belonged to one of Commander Bagran's soldiers. She reached for the hilt, hoping to arm herself, but it was scorching hot. She almost had enough strength to wield it, but the burns and blisters would have been too much. If she forced it, her fists would be useless in the future battles. She made the painful decision to leave it behind. After moving a bit further along the path, she noticed that there was a corrupted orc who seemed to have good control over those beasts. He was smarter and more aggressive than the hounds. Since it was the first time for OmegaMonka to face such an enemy, she was a bit hesitant, but soon realized he was no match for her monk training. OmegaMonka struck with ferocity, using her full kit, which involved Expel Harm, Vivify, and precise dodging. The battle was grueling, but she emerged victorious. Further in, the atmosphere grew heavier. Cracks in the ground spewed occasional jets of flame. Shadows danced unnaturally. Then she found it, a mature flamehound, mid-feast on a scout. The hound was so famished that it did not realize that our hero was beating it to death to save that helpless orc. As soon as this hound was defeated, OmegaMonka noticed a veteran cloak stuck on one of its legs. She tried to pull it from underneath him, but soon realized that its pointy nails on his paws ripped the cloak in half, rendering it completely useless. Alas, there was nothing she can do about it. The scout thanked our hero and was given the instructions on how to leave the chasm. OmegaMonka's limbs ached with exhaustion, her breath ragged and shallow. But there was no room for rest. Not here, not now. Looming before her was a monstrous infernal hound, grotesquely oversized, its molten eyes seething with pain and fury. It didn't belong in this cave. Nothing like it should have. Its presence was unnatural, as if it had been dragged from another realm and shackled to this place against its will. The hatred in its gaze wasn't just directed at her, it burned for everything. Around it lay the twisted, charred corpses of Throgs, their bodies torn apart, half devoured. They had been its food, nothing more? Offerings left behind by something far more sinister. A foul energy clung to the air like a curse. This was no random beast. It was bound here by the will of a dark cult, enslaved to guard their secrets, to kill for them, to suffer in their name. OmegaMonka could feel it, the creature's agony, its rage, its yearning for release. And yet, even knowing that, fear still clenched her heart. This thing would burn her alive without hesitation, but she knew what had to be done. With a cry of defiance, she charged. Fire surged toward her as the hound roared, but she was already moving, rolling, striking, fists and feet flying in a blur of desperate precision. Flames bit into her flesh. Smoke stung her eyes, but still she fought. Again and again she struck the beast, not out of hatred, but mercy. At last, with a final, echoing snarl, the infernal collapsed. Its eyes dimmed. The cave fell still. OmegaMonka stood over the body, scorched and trembling. The creature was free. And somewhere deep in the shadows, the cult that had bounded would soon learn that their nightmare had found its end. Moving forward, she was greeted with another orc. She hoped it would be an ally, but it would be foolish to think that a friendly individual would be this deep inside a corrupted chasm. She tried to approach him, but immediately took a battling stance. He inflicted a deep wound on our hero, but he was no match for her. She meditated, used her healing touch, and was ready to move on. It was clear that her foes moving forward were different. She had to reevaluate her training. She remembered that sometimes one must unlearn and relearn techniques should one become closer to their perfect self. A new type of foe stood in front of her. Not only were they skilled with a mace, but also possessed some form of magical ability. They were able to cast a threatening spell where they would force themselves or any nearby allies to develop an uncontrollable desire to kill or injure others. It was surely an ability that must not be overlooked. She kept killing her foes until she encountered another villainous individual. He did not look like the others. He clearly possessed some ability in dark magic. He seemed too busy casting some type of ritual to notice our hero. Rather than jumping straight into battle, our champion decided to observe what he was doing, the way he was holding his pose, and the way he was waving his hands. OmegaMonka realized that this was a dark shaman that she read about from an ancient scroll. She was convinced that he was able to cast two types of abilities, Twisted Elements and Shadow Storm. She was ready to engage him, but first she had to free one other scout hiding inside a box. Once he was saved, she rushed the dark shaman. The ritual was immediately interrupted, and rather than resorting to his dark magic, he started stabbing our champion with his sword. He then recollected his thoughts and started casting his dark magic. Our hero dodged, attacked, and healed. Amidst the battle with the dark shaman, he shouted, "How dare you defeat my beloved creature? How dare you defeat Adarok?" It was at this moment OmegaMonka realized that the giant infernal hound that was begging to be put out of its misery was called Adarok. The dark shaman fell quicker than she expected. Whether it was the hard-earned experience she gained deeper in the cavern, or the shaman's own overconfidence, the battle felt far less punishing than her clash with Adarok. His magic had been fierce, but unfocused, like he hadn't expected anyone to reach him alive. OmegaMonka knelt beside his twisted body, sifting through the remnants of his belongings. Trinkets, bone charms, a cracked totem, nothing of real value. Whatever secret he held had died with him, leaving behind only the stench of smoke and failure. She continued to advance deep within the cavern until she saw a giant worm. How could a giant creature survive in that hot lava? It was very clear that unusual creatures were enslaved by that despicable dark shaman. This was more than enough evidence to confirm her suspicions. Unlike other oak, this creature radiated no sorrow, only purpose. There was no plea for release in its eyes, no trace of suffering. It existed for one reason alone: to eliminate anything that dared stand in its path. As the battle unfolded, OmegaMonka began to read its patterns. It was a creature of instinct, not cunning. It spewed molten lava in sweeping arcs and vanished beneath the scorched earth, only to erupt elsewhere in a surprise assault. Simple, yes, but relentless. The fight pushed her to her limits. Every second demanded precision, every dodge a gamble. The heat was suffocating, the pressure unrelenting. But when the creature finally collapsed in a spray of ash and steam, it was OmegaMonka who remained standing, wounded, weary, but victorious. Now that the giant worm was defeated, our champion could sense that she was reaching the end of the cavern. She defeated some more familiar foes, until the final corrupted reaver decided to drop our hero simple bands that she could use before her biggest fight. She picked them up and hoped that they would be a perfect fit. She struggled a bit to put them on, but fortunately she managed. They surely did not help much, but any help would do. Moving forward, she saw another ritual being committed by hooded cultists. Without warning, a massive orc burst through the stone like a living avalanche. In a blur of motion, he tore through the cultists, crushing bones, silencing screams. Blood stained the ritual site. OmegaMonka froze, breath caught in her throat. This was no ordinary enemy. There was no hesitation in his movements, no mercy in his eyes, only raw, unrelenting power. She studied him quickly, trying to understand his rhythm, his strengths, his weaknesses. But dread gnawed at the edges of her resolve. This battle would be unlike anything she has faced before, and it might be the one that finally broke her. For the first time, OmegaMonka turned and fled. Terror gripped her, not the fleeting fear of death, but the cold certainty that facing such a monster was sheer madness. She had never ran before, but this time, she did. As she rushed back through the winding tunnels, heart pounding, she was stopped by two familiar faces, her trusted allies, the one she had met at the cavern's entrance. Their expressions were warm, full of gratitude. "You've done more than we could have hoped," one of them said. "The corruption here is breaking. You've given this place a chance to breathe again." But as she spoke with Invoker Shorent, something stirred deep within her, a surge of energy, unfamiliar, yet familiar. Her chakra shifted, more focused, more potent, as if her spirit had been tempered by fire. She could feel it. Her strength has grown. She looked back into the darkness. No, she couldn't leave. Not while that creature, the very heart of this nightmare, still roamed free. Her body trembled, but not from fear, from conviction. To walk away now would be to live in dishonor. She would return, she would face him, and if it meant her death, so be it. That was the path of a true hero. So off she went, ready to face this enraged orc. She started striking him, but he struck harder. She doubted herself amidst the battle and attempted to run away. On her way out, she got trapped by another group of evil orcs. There was no way out. She tried to heal her wounds, but the giant beast struck her until she fell unconscious. She regained consciousness and found herself at the entrance of the chasm. She must have been dragged by one of the scouts she saved before. Furious and disappointed, she rushed back to have another fight with this deranged orc. But this time, she wanted to make sure that no other foe could interfere with their combat. So she struck down the 3 orcs that were closing her path off. She engaged the orc once more, this time with more anger and ferocity, but it was still not enough. 3rd time's the charm. This had to be the one, the final attempt to end it all. But before plunging back into the fire, OmegaMonka knew she had to pause, not to rest, but to reflect. Charging in headlong twice already had only brought her pain and near death. It was time to stop moving and start listening. To her breath, to the silence, to herself. She sat cross-legged at the edge of the cavern, the distant rumble of the beast echoing faintly through the stone. Her body ached, but her spirit was still. She closed her eyes and surged inward, letting the chaos fade. Then, like a whisper from a distant lifetime, her master's voice returned to her. Never let anger cloud your judgment. Calm yourself and strike with purpose. Patience and discipline, these are the virtues a monk must wield if she wishes to triumph. A slow breath escaped her lips. The words settled over her like a warm cloak. And in that moment of clarity, still centered, focused, a realization struck like lightning. A plan, not one driven by rage or desperation, but by insight. She rose to her feet with new purpose burning in her eyes. This time, she wouldn't just fight. She would outthink him. The orc might be stronger, but he definitely was not faster. His body was too big to be fast and flexible. So she strategically positioned herself on the edge of the border separating land from lava, and engaged the enraged foe. He chased her up, and she fled down, striking him with her lightning. This plan seemed to work, and she was very delighted on how things were going, until she fumbled. One mistimed step, one misjudged dodge, and everything fell apart. She already fell unconscious 3 times. She knew that death was knocking on the door, but this time OmegaMonka felt certain. She knew her plan works. She just needed to stay sharp and plant her feet a bit better. And so the longest fight for OmegaMonka started. Step by step, she repeated the strategy. Kite the orc up the ramp, leap down, strike, reset. He couldn't jump behind her. He was massive, and he was afraid that he could break the ground beneath him and fall in the lava. Instead, he walked down the path he thought was optimal. While he was walking, OmegaMonka struck him with her crackling jade lightning ability. This dance went on for 1 hour 28 minutes. An hour and a half of relentless strikes, precise movement, and razor-thin margins. Her muscles screamed, her mind blurred, her thoughts melted into a fog of pure survival. Her brain turned into soup. But finally, it was over. The orc collapsed with a thunderous crash, his body finally giving in to the relentless assault. And then clang! A sword clattered to the ground, skidding across the scorched stone and landing right at OmegaMonka's feet. It did not look like any other ordinary blade. It looked like a blade infused with cursed energy. OmegaMonka was somewhat hesitant to pick it up, but she mustered the courage to do so. The blade reacted to her touch. It started vibrating, as if it was not certain whether it wanted OmegaMonka to be its new master. The now defeated orc, which looked more sane than before, whispered his last words to our champion. "The blade has accepted you. Archmage Aragal is waiting." Completely confused by these words, OmegaMonka was approached by her new friends and thanked her for her hard work to purify this chasm from dark magic. Where will our hero go next? What other areas in this world must be cleansed from evil? Who is this Archmage Aragal? What is this connection between the blade and Archmage Aragal? So many questions. Hopefully, we will find some answers in the next episode. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked this video, please leave it a like, comment, and consider subscribing. It will really encourage me to release the next episode. Thank you, and see you in the next one.